Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and in this video, we're going to do a little kitchen science. Oftentimes, I will get questions from my viewers about certain ingredients that they see on the nutritional labels for various keto products. And one of those ingredients that's been showing up an awful lot lately is some variation of tapioca fiber or tapioca starch. I have seen a lot of keto baked goods lately that include soluble tapioca fiber, but increasingly now I'm seeing tapioca starch. One such product that has tapioca starch is this Scotty's bread mix right here. If you look at it, the number one ingredient on there is resistant tapioca starch. Now, I've used tapioca starch in the past, back in my pre-keto days when I was really into molecular gastronomy. You can do some kind of cool stuff with it. You can basically turn any fat into a powder that then, once it goes into your mouth and heats up and gets a little moisture, becomes whatever that thing was again. So you could use, for example, bacon fat, although I don't know how tasty that would be, but peanut butter. You can make peanut butter powder, and then it just reconstitutes itself in your mouth. Kind of a gimmicky thing. I've done some PB&J shooters, for example, where I take the peanut butter and I turn it into powder, and then I take some Concord grape juice and made spheres, like little gel spheres that then pop in your mouth. Anyhow, kind of fun, but gimmicky, and not something I'm all that concerned about for keto. Where tapioca starch does potentially start to get interesting is in the realm of gluten-free and maybe even keto baking. Tapioca starch is supposed to improve the crumb or inside of the bread. It also helps with moisture retention and is supposed to improve the overall texture of any baked good. The problem is, the standard tapioca starch that you can buy at the store, like Bob's Red Mill, I'm sure there's other brands, very high in carbs. The Scotty's bread mix that I showed you a minute ago uses a resistant tapioca starch. Now, currently this stuff isn't available, to regular consumers, like on Amazon or anything. But through my partnership with Modernist Pantry, Janie Wang, one of the owners, was able to source for me some resistant tapioca starch. And I told her that I would try it out, I would see if it affects my blood glucose, I would see if there are any keto cooking applications for it, and if so, it may be a product that they start to carry. However, if it does impact my blood glucose, all bets are off. So to test this in baking, I am going to do the quickest, simplest possible test a person can do. I'm going to make a couple of chaffles. I will make a couple with the resistant tapioca starch, and then I will make just a couple of standard chaffles to use as a baseline to compare the flavor and the texture. And also, I will be taking a 2-hour blood glucose test with my Levels continuous glucose monitor. Now, because it's important to me to test the texture, I'm going to be doing a cream cheese chaffle rather than a mozzarella chaffle. So we have 2 ounces of cream cheese right here. And 1 large egg. And we'll process this until smooth. We'll scrape down the sides. Now, normally when I add something into a chaffle, I go with 1 tablespoon, but I really want to test the impact of this tapioca starch. I'm going to go with 2 tablespoons, which ought to equal about 13 or 14 net carbs. And we'll process this. Scrape down the sides and give it a few more pulses. Our Dash Minis are preheated. This is a very thin batter. I'm going to be careful how full I go because it seems like whenever I do a thin batter, it overflows. Now, I find that most of the time, it takes about 6 minutes to get my chaffles where I like them. And where I like them is when I quit seeing steam coming out of the Dash Minis. Well, we're only 4 minutes in, and they've quit steaming. So they're done a little bit sooner. I don't know if the tapioca starch had anything to do with that, but we're going to pop these out and move them to a cooling rack. They're quite a bit more firm than I usually get with a cream cheese chaffle. I had enough batter left over to do another one. I probably could have split it just between the two, but I didn't feel like doing any cleanup. And then we have our baseline version, just the egg and cream cheese. It has been a little bit over 5 minutes and they have stopped steaming, so we will pop these out. Definitely far more delicate texture. We'll let these cool for a minute and then give them a taste test. If you've watched my other resistant starch videos on rice and potatoes, which I'll link to up here, you saw that the inclusion of fat has a significant blunting effect on blood glucose. And that means that the cream cheese and egg that I put in this chaffle may have a blunting effect as well. But realistically, I can't see any of us eating tapioca starch straight up. We're probably all going to eat it in a baked good, so I wanted to test it in a real-world capacity. Now, because I got 3 chaffles out of this mixture, I'm going to eat all 3 of these for the sake of the blood glucose experiment, which I'm going to take a picture here with the level software and mark the beginning of this experiment. So first, taste and texture. All right, I'll tell you right away, 2 tablespoons is too much for a single batch of chaffles. If this turns out not to spike my blood glucose, I will probably try this again with just 1 tablespoon to see what the result is texture-wise. I will say that it has a little bit more of a bread-like mouthfeel, but it's lacking that sort of gluten-y cohesion. So I don't know if a combination of tapioca starch and xanthan gum would get more of a chewy, bread-like sort of chaffle. That'll be a future experiment. After that pretty dry starch chaffle, I'm kind of looking forward to this just plain egg and cream cheese one. This tastes like what chaffle haters hate in chaffles. It is more or less just like, well, what it is, egg and cream cheese cooked up in a chaffle maker. It's more or less baked egg. Now, if I were throwing a sausage patty on this and a little cheddar cheese, it'd be a great breakfast sandwich, but straight up, not so much. So now I'm going to scarf down the remaining 2.5 resistant tapioca starch chaffles, and I'll be back in an hour to see how it impacted my blood glucose. I'm back after 2 hours, and I'm not entirely sure what to make of these results. I'll put them right over here. But my blood glucose, I will tell you before I started, was a little bit elevated, and I'm not sure why that was because I was in a fasted state. I did work out earlier this morning, and I don't know if this is some sort of a blood glucose rebound after working out. I'm not sure. At 22 points, it definitely qualifies as a bump, but not a spike. A spike generally is 30 points or more. And at the 2-hour mark, I was lower than when I started. So for right now, I'm going to call this inconclusive until I do some more testing. So tomorrow, I'm going to test again. This time, I will not have worked out before I start. I will be in a fasted state. I will make sure that my blood glucose is stable. I will then test both the resistant tapioca starch and then wait 2 hours. And then depending on the results, I will also test regular tapioca starch. See you tomorrow. It is now day 2 of my modified resistant tapioca starch experiment. This morning at 9:30, I mixed 2 tablespoons of the resistant starch into a glass of water, right here, and then chugged it down. 2 tablespoons in a glass of water. This is not a drink that I would recommend. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but certainly not yummy. In terms of my blood glucose, you can see it right here. I'm going to look at it on my phone. Virtually no movement. And it was pretty much stable for an hour and a half. I mean, like no reaction at all. Then right around 11 a.m., there was some sort of weird little just speed bump. It was like 5 points, 10 points, hardly anything, and it lasted only for 10 minutes. Have no idea what could have caused that. But then by the end of 2 hours, I was back down to 88. So I'm willing to say now, having tried out this modified resistant tapioca starch in about as pure a scientific test as I can do as just one person, just mixing it with water in a fasted state while my blood glucose was stable, no exercise, just no extra variables, this stuff looks legit. So if I were to see resistant tapioca starch on the ingredient list in a keto product, I would not be concerned. At least it had no effect on me. And now for comparison's sake, I've got some Bob's Red Mill tapioca starch. Again, I'm gonna mix 2 tablespoons into a glass of water, chug it down, and see what happens over the next 2 hours. 1, 2. I'll mix it with this coffee frother. Looks a lot like milk. Tastes nothing like milk. Cheers. I don't know what I'd compare that to. Not yummy. Anyhow, it is 11:54. I will be back in 2 hours with the blood glucose test. It's been 2 hours since I had the non-resistant tapioca starch. So let's do a scan of the continuous glucose monitor. This is not what I was expecting at all. And I don't know whether I should be excited or whether I should be disappointed, but my blood glucose change, here, let me step aside, as you see right here, on just the regular tapioca starch, changed only 5 points. Essentially, if you remove that little bump that happened for some odd reason on the resistant tapioca starch, it's the same. They're both just flat. Here, let me see if I can pull them up together. So you can see the green line is the regular tapioca starch. So it just kind of went up gradually and then back down. The white line is the resistant tapioca starch, and you can see not a whole lot was happening there, and then there was that little bump at 11, and then it came back down almost immediately. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what to make of all of this. One of the things that I've read is that the Bob's Red Mill potato starch and potato flour are resistant. I haven't tried them out yet, and I'm wondering if Bob's Red Mill tapioca starch is resistant as well. That's the only thing I can think of, unless I can get my hands on some other tapioca starch, another brand, to try it out. But I suppose that's good news then if we want to use this stuff in baking, which I'm going to do right now with some Truffles. I'm not going to show you me doing the Truffles again. We did that earlier. We'll just do the taste test. So this time I just did a single tablespoon of the resistant tapioca starch. I also did about 3/4 of a teaspoon of xanthan gum, hoping to give it a little bit more chew. You can see, unlike that one yesterday, this one is actually flexible. The recipe on this was the same as yesterday: 1 egg, 2 tablespoons of cream cheese, then the tapioca starch and the xanthan gum. Just a very, very mild, eggy flavor. I'm really liking this texture. I mean, it's pretty close to Wonder Bread, honestly. I don't know if xanthan gum is the answer on this. There are some other ingredients that I'm playing around with, to try and get that gluten-y sort of mouthfeel and texture. But this has me feeling pretty good about the baking potential of tapioca starch. You can also see when I was making the Truffles this time around, I got a little bit of rise. And this was with no baking powder, so I'm assuming that that rise is coming from the tapioca starch. So the quick takeaways on this. First of all, resistant tapioca starch in keto products, I think, is safe for us. Next takeaway is I probably need to get my hands on some other brand other than Bob's Red Mill and do a blood glucose test on that. Like I said, the tapioca starch didn't cause me any sort of inflammation, so that's a good thing as well. I need to do some more baked goods with this. I mean, this is something that's sort of like a white, floury substance. It's not gritty or dark. I truly think that this could be part of a keto white flour sort of blend, and I'm pretty excited to play around with it. I also need to throw out a quick thank you to Janie Wang at Modernist Pantry for hooking me up with this resistant tapioca starch. I mean, this isn't even a product that they carry, and she still sourced some for me just so that I could try it out and see how it works, see if it impacts my blood glucose, and so on. So after I try out a couple of other brands other than Bob's Red Mill to see how they impact my blood glucose, and after I experiment a little bit more in the kitchen with this in terms of breading, baking, a thickener potentially, I don't know. We're going to try these things out, and if all goes well, I will reach back out to Janie and see if I can convince her to have Modernist Pantry start to carry this as a product. If you enjoyed this little keto kitchen science video, click that like button. If you're not a subscriber already, tap that subscribe button, then hit the bell and turn on all notifications. And lastly, if you'd like to help support the Keto Test Kitchen and see more videos like this, click that join button and see what memberships and perks are all about. Thanks for watching.